When Wings entered production in 1926, aerial photography was still in its formative stage. Aviation itself was little more than 2 decades old, and Hollywood had never attempted a film that placed actors inside real aircraft while cameras rolled hundreds of feet in the air. Yet Paramount and director William A. Wellman committed to a project that pushed the limits of what the silent era could capture. This was a moment when American studios were refining the industrial scale of their productions, and Wings emerged as one of the most ambitious undertakings of its time. Welcome to the Cinematic Century Chronicle, and this is Wings. This video contains spoilers. If you haven't seen Wings yet, I recommend pausing here, watching the most complete restored version available, and returning when you're ready. Released in 1927 and directed by William A. Wellman, Wings follows 2 young American recruits, Jack Powell, played by Charles Buddy Rogers, and David Armstrong, played by Richard Arlen, whose wartime experiences shape the shifting personal dynamics that unfold against the backdrop of aerial combat. Rogers was a rising Paramount contract player whose youthful screen presence aligned naturally with the role of an idealistic volunteer, while Arlen, who had prior aviation experience, had already appeared in several supporting roles and brought a more understated, grounded quality to his performance. Their pairing reflected the studio's strategy of matching familiar talent with the demands of large-scale production. Early in the film, a suburban introduction scene featuring David Armstrong and Sylvia Lewis includes one of the production's first experiments with dynamic camera movement. The camera travels in rhythm with the swing's arc, creating an unusually fluid tracking shot for the late silent era. Jack Powell enters the frame in the background, and the motion of the swing establishes the characters' relationships through staging and movement before the narrative transitions to enlistment. This early experiment with kinetic framing foreshadows the more elaborate camera mobility that appears later in the Paris Leave sequence and throughout the aerial photography. The film also features Clara Bow, then one of the most recognizable stars in American cinema, whose presence helped carry the film's emotional core for audiences. By 1927, Bow had become a defining figure of the decade, and her expressive performance as Mary Preston provided a human counterpoint to the film's technical spectacle. Creating that spectacle, particularly in the air, required a director with first-hand knowledge of flight, and William A. Wellman's experience shaped every stage of the production. William A. Wellman was not brought onto the project because of his studio track record. At the time, he was relatively untested at that scale. Paramount selected him because he was a former fighter pilot. During World War I, Wellman flew with the Lafayette Flying Corps, the group of American volunteers who served under French command before the United States formally entered the war. He survived crashes, served in active combat, and had seen aerial engagements firsthand. Wellman brought that direct knowledge to set, and it influenced every stage of the production. He insisted that the planes behave accurately, that dogfights reflect real combat maneuvers, and that the cinematography capture not just spectacle but operational detail. This emphasis on authenticity shaped everything from flight choreography to stunt design to camera placement. Paramount recognized that a full aerial war film would require support beyond anything the studio could supply on its own. To meet that need, the production partnered with the U.S. Army Air Service, which provided pilots, aircraft, personnel, and access to training fields. This collaboration gave Wings an operational footprint closer to a military exercise than a conventional shoot. The production used real biplanes configured to resemble European fighters, and many scenes incorporated actual military drills. The Army assigned hundreds of personnel to support the film, and Paramount constructed large-scale sets, including a full Battlefront staging area complete with artillery, trenches, and burning structures. The result was an unusual hybrid environment, part film set, part military demonstration, and part training operation. Because of this cooperation, much of the aerial footage features real pilots performing coordinated flight maneuvers designed specifically for the camera. The film's most recognizable dogfight sequences were staged entirely in the air, with aircraft executing planned movements to create clear, readable action. To capture real flight, Wellman needed actors who could appear convincingly airborne. Charles Buddy Rogers and Richard Arlen, who play the film's 2 central aviators, underwent flight training so that footage of them in the cockpit could be used without cutting to doubles. While Rogers did not become a solo pilot, Arlen already had flight experience, and both actors learned enough to handle extended cockpit takes. Because the silent camera equipment of the mid-1920s was heavy, mounting it inside or onto aircraft required engineering solutions. The production team developed custom mounts that secured the camera to the fuselage, with additional bracing added to support the weight and counter vibration. The actors were required to trigger the camera themselves once airborne, coordinating their performance with the motion of the aircraft. The cockpit lighting came entirely from natural sunlight, which shifted across the frame as the planes rolled and climbed, giving the footage a visual quality uncommon in silent-era close-ups. These combined elements produced images where the horizon visibly tilts and the aircraft moves through real space, imagery that remains one of the film's defining technical achievements. Although Wings is best known for its aviation sequences, Clara Bow's role as Mary Preston was one of its major draws in 1927. Bow was among the most recognizable stars of the decade, widely noted for her screen presence and expressive style. Paramount added her to the production in part to broaden the film's appeal, a decision that reflected the studio's awareness of her commercial influence. Bow herself later expressed frustration that her inclusion felt secondary to the aviation material, but her performance nevertheless anchors key emotional moments in the film. Understanding Bow's position in the industry at the time adds context. By 1927, she had become an icon associated with modernity and youth culture, and audiences responded strongly to her dramatic roles. In Wings, she provides a ground-level perspective that contrasts with the danger and spectacle of the air war. Even without extensive screen time relative to the aviation footage, Bow's presence adds rhythm and balance to the narrative, reinforcing the human dimension within a production defined by its technical ambition. One of the most striking aspects of Wings is the way motion is used to structure scenes. Wellman integrates movement into the narrative design. Aircraft rise and fall, lines of pursuit create visual rhythms, and the camera's alignment with each maneuver embeds the instability and risk of flight directly into the image. The initial combat mission introduces many of the film's visual strategies. Planes are framed against clouds, tree lines, and horizon lines to give viewers a sense of altitude and orientation. When Jack and David fly in formation during their first engagement, the nearby aircraft serve as spatial anchors. This approach makes the battles readable despite their complexity. A widely recognized shot in Wings, often circulated on social media, is the camera traveling above dining tables in a Paris nightclub before settling on Jack. While the attention it receives is deserved, it's worth noting how the shot fits within the broader context of the film. The movement through the nightclub establishes a sense of opulence and density, with the camera gliding through the room at slightly below eye level and passing between small pockets of activity. What follows is just as interesting. Visual effects work that blends practical footage with bubbles drifting across the frame. These additional elements extend the dreamlike quality of the scene and contribute to the film's stylistic range. The sequence earns its reputation not only because of the technical achievement, but because it captures the contrast between the warfront and the controlled chaos of urban entertainment. The aerial photography in Wings did not come without risk. Early aviation was inherently dangerous, and stunt flying added layers of unpredictability. The production relied heavily on Army Air Service pilots who flew several flights each day. Weather shifts, turbulence, and visibility issues frequently interrupted the work, and several flights were aborted mid-mission when conditions became unsafe. At least one fatal accident occurred during production, a reminder of how dangerous large-scale aerial filmmaking was in the 1920s. Other incidents, including hard landings and minor crashes, underscored the limited safety infrastructure available to early filmmakers. Paramount and the military crew coordinated stunt patterns through hand signals and prearranged formations, but the margin for error remained extremely narrow. Wellman's insistence on realism required accepting risks that would be considered unacceptable today, and the production environment reflects how early aviation cinema navigated high stakes with few established guidelines. Some of the film's most memorable set pieces occurred during low-altitude attacks. Two sequences stand out for how they combine direction, editing, and aerial choreography. In one, Jack dives toward a bridge while enemy troops attempt to cross. The shot progression from a distant aerial view to a tight point of view descent gives a clear sense of the maneuver's speed and danger. The camera tracks the dive smoothly, maintaining enough distance to make the environment readable. A similar sequence shows Jack descending toward a moving column of soldiers. Once again, the POV shots place the viewer inside the cockpit, with the plane cutting through space in a way that still feels immediate. The camera captures both the approach and the pull away, giving the strike a full visual arc. These moments demonstrate how Wellman approached aerial combat as a blend of geography and motion. The clarity of these sequences, especially given the era, is unusual for silent-era war cinema. The process of editing Wings required shaping hours of aerial footage into coherent battle sequences. Eloyd Sheldon, the film's credited editor, organized the material with an emphasis on clarity, establishing where each plane was positioned, how it related to the others, and how the engagement shifted from one maneuver to the next. Lucian Hubbard, who produced the film, also contributed editorial work behind the scenes, though without formal credit. Howard Hawks, then a young Paramount story editor with aviation experience, assisted informally with assembling these sequences. Though uncredited, his work helped shape the pacing and operational detail of the aerial material. Hawks would later become one of the major directors of Hollywood's classical era, known for films such as Scarface, Bringing Up Baby, and His Girl Friday. His involvement on Wings reflects how the studio environment of the silent era often brought emerging filmmakers into technical and editorial roles when productions demanded it. Although the air war dominates the film, Wings also builds out an extensive ground campaign, staged on large sets with trenches, artillery placements, and structures designed to burn on cue. Paramount and the Army Air Service worked together to coordinate hundreds of participants, soldiers, extras, and the technical crew, so the movement on the ground carried the same sense of organized momentum as the film's aerial sequences. The result is a battlefield that feels unusually expansive for 1927, with smoke, debris, and staggered lines of action filling the frame. One of the most memorable ground shots uses double exposure to layer marching troops, with aircraft passing overhead. Even though the footage comes from two separate passes, the composite creates the impression of simultaneous movement across different planes of action. It's a technique that allows the film to show the scale of mobilization in a single image. When Wings was released, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences was still a new institution, and its first award ceremony in 1929 reflected the industry's attempt to formalize recognition during a period of rapid growth. Wings received the Academy Award for Outstanding Picture, the category that would later evolve into Best Picture. The award was not yet associated with the cultural weight it carries today, but it signaled how the industry understood the film, a major production that represented the scale, ambition, and technical coordination studios were increasingly capable of. Nearly a century after its release, Wings remains one of early Hollywood's most ambitious technical accomplishments. Its aerial photography, shaped by William A. Wellman's first-hand combat experience, captures flight with a clarity and immediacy rare for the silent era. The film's combination of military cooperation, innovative camera rigging, large-scale staging, and committed performances helped define how aviation would be represented on screen for generations. Next time on Cinematic Century Chronicle, we'll continue through 1927 and explore The Cat and the Canary, a film that shaped the look of early American comedy horror through expressionist lighting, architectural staging, and theatrical atmosphere. Subscribe and join me as we continue to chronicle 100 years of film, one story at a time. Until next time, have a great rest of your day.